You keep telling yourself you're healing. You journal. You light candles. You meditate. You read quotes about growth and letting go. You speak softly. You say you've moved on. You say you've done the work. But inside, you still flinch. You still shut down. You still disappear when things get too close. That's not healing. That's coping. That's survival, wrapped in spirituality. It looks peaceful, but it's hollow. It sounds wise, but it's scripted. Because real healing isn't pretty. It's violent, uncomfortable, loud, raw. It doesn't come with aesthetics. It comes with collapse. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that's what you're doing. Calling your patterns destiny. Calling your fear boundaries. Calling your isolation growth. But it's not. You haven't healed. You've adapted. You've learned how to function with pain, not release it. And now you're trapped, smiling on the surface, bleeding underneath, but still saying, "I'm fine. I'm just focusing on myself." No, you're hiding from yourself, and you've just gotten good at it. You're not calm. You're disconnected. You're not healed. You're numb. And the worst part? You call that progress. You stopped crying, not because it doesn't hurt, but because you no longer let yourself feel. You stopped reacting, not because you've evolved, but because you've shut down. You call it peace, but it's paralysis. You're not over it. You're under it, buried, compressed, contained. And every time life touches the wound, you flinch like it's new. That's not growth. That's delay. Carl Jung warned us, what you refuse to face will run your life. And you've been running. From the grief, from the rage, from the confusion, from the truth. You don't want to heal. You want to forget. You want to erase the memory instead of rewriting the meaning. But it doesn't work like that. You can't skip the fire and still rise like a phoenix. You want transformation without death. But healing requires death. Death of the identity built around your wound. Death of the story where you're always the broken one. And that kind of death, it doesn't feel like peace. It feels like destruction. But sometimes that's exactly what you need. You've made healing a brand. Aesthetic, predictable, safe. Candles, journals, clean diets, vision boards. But where's the rage? Where's the grief? Where's the truth that tastes like blood? You've made healing look like a spa day. But real healing? It's war. It's sitting with the memory until it burns your throat. It's letting your body shake without apologizing for it. It's looking your past in the eye and saying, I know what you did, and I'm still here. But no one shows that part. They show the glow up, not the breakdown. They show the after, not the exile. Carl Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. But your version of healing skips the darkness. You put glitter on it. You edit it. You call it spiritual. But it's not spirit. It's escape. Gabor Mate said, the attempt to escape from pain is what creates more pain. And that's what you've done. You built an identity around your trauma so you never have to leave it. Because leaving it means leaving the excuse, the story, the self-pity. And without that, who are you? You're not healing. You're preserving the wound. Because without it, you'd have to rebuild everything. You've made peace with the surface, but your soul's still screaming. You wake up tired, not from life, from suppression. You feel heavy, but there's no name for the weight, because naming it would mean facing it, and you're not ready. You meditate to avoid thinking. You stay busy healing so you don't have to feel. But your body remembers the tight jaw, the restless sleep, the sudden snap when someone gets too close. You say you're over it, but your nervous system says otherwise. Because trauma doesn't care about your timeline. It doesn't care about your Instagram captions. It doesn't care how many books you've read. It waits, quietly, patiently, until something triggers the echo. And suddenly, you're 6 years old again, or 16, or 22. Back in the room, back in the silence, back in the moment that changed everything. Nietzsche said, we are all more intelligent than we are wise. You know what happened. You can describe it, explain it, analyze it. But wisdom? That only comes when you stop running. And you haven't stopped. You've just decorated the escape. You've made it look meaningful. But pain in a pretty box is still pain. And silence in a polished mouth is still suffocation. So tell the truth. You're not healed. You're hidden. Your body never lies, even when your mouth does, even when your feed does, even when your therapist nods and says, that's progress. Your chest still tightens, your breath still shortens, your skin still bristles when someone says the wrong name. That's not healing. That's residue. Buried doesn't mean gone. Dismissed doesn't mean dealt with. Calm doesn't mean clean. You keep trying to move on. But there is no on. There's only through. You can't bypass grief. You can't fast-track rage. You can't skip shame and still claim freedom. Real healing isn't linear. It's circular. It repeats. It reopens. It ruins dinner with people who meant well. Carl Jung believed every wound holds a key. But you can't unlock it until you stop pretending it's not there. And you've pretended long enough. Every "I'm okay" was a lie. Every "I've let it go" was fear. Every "it's in the past" was a prison. But the past doesn't live in your mind. It lives in your reactions. The way you freeze. The way you detach. The way you always keep one foot out the door. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're isolating. You think you're healing, but you're hiding. Because healing hurts. It has to. It breaks everything you built around your pain. You say you've changed, but changed into what? Another version of yourself that's easier to manage? More polite? Less loud? Less human? You've tamed your emotions until they forgot how to roar. You've spiritualized your trauma until it became performance. But the ache is still there, quiet, but constant. Because what you buried never left. It just waits. Behind your rituals, behind your healing playlists, behind the smile you wear, like armor. You don't need another mantra. You need a mirror. A brutal one. One that shows you the parts of yourself you abandoned because they were too much for others. Your anger, your hunger, your grief. You called them toxic. They were truth. You called them negative. They were necessary. You silenced them because they made people uncomfortable. But in doing so, you made yourself a stranger in your own life. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But you haven't become. You've performed. You've become palatable, digestible, safe, but not whole. Because wholeness includes the parts you were told to kill. And now they want out. They're knocking now. The parts you buried, the rage, the wildness, the voice that said, "I hate this," and meant it. You silenced them because you thought healing meant being calm. It doesn't. Sometimes healing screams. Sometimes it throws things. Sometimes it says, "I will never forgive you," and finally means it. But you were taught to be soft, to forgive too soon, to move on before you even processed what happened. You were told, "Let it go." So you let go of your fire, your boundaries, your instincts, and they applauded your peace. But it wasn't peace. It was submission. You became someone they could be around. Someone who didn't make them uncomfortable. Someone who kept the volume down. But inside, you were shaking. Because you can't fake stillness. Not forever. It turns into sickness, into tight shoulders, into insomnia, into emotional numbness masked as control. Carl Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And now you're waking up. You're feeling the pain you dodged for years. It's flooding back, not to break you, but to return you. Because those parts you hid, they weren't shameful. They were sacred. And they're done waiting for permission. They're not coming back quietly. The parts you buried, they're kicking the door open. The anger you swallowed, the grief you denied, the instincts you shamed. They're not asking for space. They're taking it. Because healing isn't about silencing pain. It's about listening to it. And you've ignored it long enough. You called yourself healed because you stopped crying. But tears were never the problem. Silence was. You called yourself strong because you could smile through anything. But strength without truth is just armor. And armor gets heavy. You've worn it for so long, you forgot what your skin feels like. But now the armor's cracking. And it's terrifying. Because what's underneath hasn't seen the light in years. The rawness, the confusion, the fire. But that's where the real you lives. Not in your rituals, not in your self-help books, not in your healed aesthetic. In the mess, in the contradiction, in the feeling you keep pushing down when no one's watching. Carl Jung said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But you're done avoiding. Because deep down, you know you're not broken. You're buried. And it's time to come out." This isn't a breakdown. It's an excavation. You're not falling apart. You're falling through, into the layers you buried to survive. And yes, it hurts. Because you're pulling your truth out of the wreckage you called healing. You're facing what you've avoided. The memory, the shame, the unanswered scream. You're finally letting yourself feel it. All of it. Not just the parts that fit the narrative. Not just what's digestible. Not just what makes a good quote. Because real healing? It doesn't trend. It doesn't go viral. It happens at 3 a.m. When you can't breathe. When you stop pretending. When your reflection looks back and you don't recognize it. But don't look away. You've burned the mask. You've lost the script. Now what? Now you speak. From the stomach. From the scar. From the self you exiled to keep the peace. Carl Jung wrote, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries." This is integration, not peace, but war that births you, not calm, but chaos that sets you free, not light, but shadow made sacred. You're almost home. You won't find yourself in the light. You'll find yourself in the ashes of who you tried to be, of what you pretended to feel, of the stories you told to survive. Now it's burned, and you're still here, not polished, not perfect, but real. And that's enough. You don't need to be whole to begin. You need to be honest. No more skipping steps, no more numbing pain and calling it growth. No more pretending healing looks good. It doesn't. It looks like breaking. It looks like screaming into a pillow. It looks like saying, "I'm still angry," and not apologizing for it. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But today, you did. You stopped decorating your wounds and started cleaning them. You stopped reading about healing and started doing it. And maybe no one claps. Maybe no one sees. But that's okay. Because this time, you're not doing it for them. You're doing it for the part of you that's been waiting to finally come home. And now, it has. Now answer this. What part of yourself have you been numbing, not healing? Write it in the comments. Say it out loud. Someone else might need your truth to find theirs.